Besama ab wel weld we me feskedus adawamla amen. Besama ab wel weld we me feskedus adawamla amen. Besama ab wel weld we me feskedus adawamla amen. Give thanks, blessed love, on this Sunday morning. So straight in with the reading of Exodus chapter 14. Give thanks. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel." And they turned back and encamped before Pherahoth, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal and Zephon. You shall encamp opposite it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, "They are entangled in the land. The wilderness has shut them in." I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will follow after them, and I will get honor over Pharaoh, over all his armies, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. They did so. The king of Egypt was told that the people had fled at the heart of Pharaoh, and his servants had changed towards the people. And they said, "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" He prepared his chariot and turned his army with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains all over them. Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. For the children of Israel went out with a high hand. The Egyptians pursued them. All the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army overtook them, encamping by the sea, besides Philaharoth, before Baal Zephon. When Pharaoh came before the children of Israel, lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they were very afraid. The children of Israel cried out to Yahweh. They said to Moses, "Because there are no graves in Egypt, why have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you treated us this way, to bring us out of Egypt? Isn't this the word that we have spoken to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of Yahweh, which he will work for you today. For you will never again see the Egyptians whom you have seen today. Yahweh will fight for you, and you shall be still." Yahweh said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Speak to the children of Israel, that they go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch it out your hand over the sea and divide it. The children of Israel shall go into the middle of the sea on dry ground, and behold, I myself will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them. I will get myself honor over Pharaoh, and over all his armies, over his chariots, over his horsemen. The Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh, when I have gotten myself honor over Pharaoh, over his chariots, over his horsemen." The angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. It came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was a cloud and a darkness, and it gave light by night. One didn't come near the other all night. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh caused the sea to go back a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The children of Israel went into the middle of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on the right and hand on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the middle of the sea, all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. In the morning watch, Yahweh looked out on the Egyptian army, took a pillar of fire and of cloud, and confused the Egyptian army. He took off their chariot wheels, and they drove them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Let's flee from the face of Israel, for Yahweh fights for them against the Egyptians." Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again on the Egyptians, and on their chariots and on their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled again against it. Yahweh overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the sea. The waters returned, covered the chariots and the horsemen, even of Pharaoh's army that went in after them into the sea. They remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked on dry land in the middle of the sea. Excuse me. And the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on to their left. Thus Yahweh saved Israel that day out on the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work which Yahweh did to the Egyptians, and the people feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh and in his servant Moses. Blessed love, give thanks, yet a berek for cure. So the parting of the Red Sea, this is probably one of the most famous chapters in the Bible, in the whole of the Bible, one of the most epic and iconic moments in the Bible, where the people of Israel are fleeing. Again, God said he's hardened the heart of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh and his army go after the Egyptians, and the people are scared, and they say to Moses, "Why have you taken us here? We could have stayed in slavery and be alive rather than dying in the wilderness." And then, as we heard, Moses is commanded by God to stretch his rod out across the sea, and it parts, and the people go in. And then as the Egyptians go in, and it says here that God, in the form of the cloud, that protection and the angels, separated the Egyptians and the Israelites. And then as the Egyptians started to go in, Moses again stretched his rod across the sea, and the people basically drowned, and not one of the army survived in that moment. And God himself says that he hardened Pharaoh's heart because he wanted to show the people of Egypt and the people of Israel his might and his power, and what he's willing to do to save his people. And you know, it's one of these passages in the Bible that, taken on literal terms, such a epic miracle on a grand scale would no doubt have convinced the whole nation of people that Yahweh God is the true God with the true power. And it would have also turned the face of the remaining Egyptians, who also saw and witnessed that, and those who heard of it. You know, so without moments like this, there may be not any Jewish faith or religion as we know it today. There may be not any Christianity as we know it today, and who knows, maybe not any Islam, and all the other kind of monotheist faiths that have come from those branches, because it's such an epic, large-scale moment that it would have done a huge amount to convince a huge amount of people, even if they don't witness it with their own eyes, that Yahweh is the true and living God. So it's a really important moment in the biblical story, and a really important moment in establishing God as the true God over all the earth, really. So this moment can't be estimated. It's not just in this moment, it's also about the legacy of this moment, and how that's stood to stay the test of time, really. By the end of it, it says that the people of Israel feared God. And as I said in one of the earlier videos, you know, the God of the Old Testament is often portrayed, described as a very strong, vengeful, jealous God. And he uses those terms himself, so that's not me judging God. They're terms that he himself uses, and he wants the people to fear him, and establishing his position in terms of the true God that deserves praise, and acknowledgement, and prayer, and giving thanks also was the word I was kind of trying to search for. But then the God of the New Testament is a God of portrayed as forgiveness, for real love of his people, rather than wanting his people to fear him. In the New Testament, the God is one that wants people to love him rather than fear him. And God comes with compassion. And we know with Jesus, he comes for the Jews and the Gentiles. He's not just there for one set of people, he's come for all set of people. So it's a very different strategy and covenant and a set of approaches that God has with his people in the New Testament, through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Saviour, rather than in the Old Testament, which is one about showing power and proving power through might and through empirical evidence, through what we see through those kind of miracles. We know Jesus did miracles as well, but they're on a very different scale to the miracles that we see in the Old Testament. So yeah, it's a very foundational text for many, many reasons. And again, when we become sensitized to it rather than desensitized to it, reading these passages of armies and floods and killing, what I tried to do in some of the earlier chapters as well, are actually not to become desensitized to it. This was a huge massacre on a massive scale where many people died, and there's a real brutality at the core of it. And this is why, arguably, that the interventionist God, we don't see that in the New Testament, because actually this was a time when God was doing these types of interventions, but actually there was lots of people being sacrificed to prove a point, in a way. So they're not easy reading, and it's to remembering that actually in these moments that lives were lost and lives were sacrificed on both sides. And it's praying that these times don't come again. So when there's times of war today and times of catastrophe, times of flood, personally speaking, I'm not one to say, yes, look, they must have sinned, and that's why this is happening. That's why there's a flood or tsunami or whatever, hurricane. No, it's like, no, pray for peace, pray for life, pray for forgiveness. Pray that these things don't happen again and are not repeated. And it's never about glorifying death or glorifying destruction. It's actually about wanting everyone to be living in a peaceful, harmonious world where we never see the likes of the need for this type of intervention again. Because human life is human life, and all human life is sacred. And in a way, that's what the New Testament's covenant was all about. So I'll end it here. Give thanks for these few words and thoughts and meditations. Glory be to God. Have a blessed day.